Welcome back to Vero Beach. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel as we track Nicole, a Category 1 hurricane. They upgraded it at 6 p.m. Eastern, and now it's heading towards the east coast of Florida. The latest landfall on record, once it makes landfall, it's probably going to be about 1 or 2 a.m. Eastern, somewhere between here and West Palm Beach. And the rain is coming in right now. We've had one strong squall. It's not raining particularly hard, but look at the radar. You can see the center rotation now between the northern Bahamas, Freeport, and the east coast of Florida, Palm Beach County and Martin and the counties south of here. This is Indian River County. So it's going to come in maybe a little north of the Palm Beaches after midnight tonight. The surge warning is up, the storm surge warning, 3 to 5 feet. And look at the Atlantic tonight. Boy, it is all churned up. We've got a high tide going on right now. Thankfully, the tide's going to be going out. 2:18 low tide here at the beach in Vero. And as the hurricane makes landfall at 1, maybe 2 a.m., that coincides with the low tide. So that's a good thing. That's going to cut down on the overall surge and the amount of water that could get up in the front yard here in Vero Beach. We still have the flood watch in effect. That goes until midday tomorrow. So inland areas, watch out again for some localized flash flooding. And Jackie, you know, I was thinking about how late this hurricane is. So I did a little digging into my records, and 13 years ago tonight, I was on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi awaiting the arrival of Ida, Tropical Storm Ida, which eventually hit the East Coast, and they called it Nor-Ida. Then I remembered 2 years ago, we went into the Greek alphabet, and we had Tropical Storm Ada, and we were down in Florida on the 11th and 12th of November. So actually, 2 other times we've been out later than this, but not for a landfalling hurricane. That's the key. This is late, very late.
Yes. Very late, very rare, Mike. Certainly not something we want to be dealing with. And we've got a blizzard, by the way, that's going to be ongoing this time tomorrow.
Here is the shot of the hurricane on the radar, and we've got that onshore push there happening into places like Vero Beach, where it is gusting over 40 miles an hour. So our Mike Seidel, who's there in Vero Beach, this is the pounding that the beaches have been taking, and we got a long way to go, Mike. How bad has the erosion been?
It's pretty bad. They've lost a lot of sand. They lost 4 feet of dune. We had part of a dune left yesterday when we wrapped up. We had another high tide. We've had 2 high tides since then, and now this third one, and that dune is gone. And we have occasionally a wave will come up and splash over the fence. There's a big drop down here. This drops down. So the waves come up, hit this, and splash over. Get a load of the surf behind me. Boy, the Atlantic is, this is pretty rough, pretty sporty for November. And remember, once this makes landfall, it's going to be the latest on record on the east coast of Florida. So we got the pounding of the waves. It is just not today. This really started back on Sunday. Not like this, but the tides are running a little bit higher. I checked out the surf cams on Sunday before I got on the plane. I'm like, oh my gosh, not only here, but all the way up to Jacksonville. So as Dr. Dodd mentioned, how large this storm is, and we got the tropical storm watches up 2 states north of here. So it gives you an idea. It's not a very small, compact storm. It really has some of the characteristics of a nor'easter, where you have winds extending far from the center. Now that center is going to make landfall after midnight south of here. Between here and the Palm Beaches, probably around Stewart, maybe Jensen Beach, that area. But we're already, as you can see on the radar, getting into the outer eye wall. Some heavier rain now pelting me. Winds are sustained about 35 to 40 miles an hour. Weather station up the coast has gusted to 64 miles an hour. Power outages have ramped up slowly. Last time I checked, we had about 8,000 in Florida. So not a lot of power out at this point. And the other issue is the rainfall. Inland areas, we have flood watches up in this area until 1 p.m. tomorrow, so watch out in the morning. If you don't have to go out, there'll be standing water around. But once the storm goes by us overnight, then the winds are going to go offshore. They'll come around at the southwest, and that will take care of any more surge issues. We have the storm surge warning, 3 to 5 feet, and the good thing is we've discussed the low tide here is at 2:18 a.m. Eastern, and that's going to be roughly the time Nicole makes landfall. But before Nicole makes landfall, we get this push of water with this north to northeast wind. The winds have come more north than northeast, and that'll blow the water more parallel to the coast than at the coast. That helps out just a smidgen. So we got a lot going on out here. It's hard to believe it's November. And remember, we had no storms, no named storms in August. Then we had Ian on September 28th, and then it was quiet in October, and here we are heading into we're in the second week of November. Up the coast, too. I mentioned how large the footprint is of this storm. We got Jim Cantori up at Daytona Shores, where they've seen buildings literally falling into the ocean. Jim? Okay, Jim, thanks for the report up there at Daytona Beach Shores. Back here in Vero Beach, the surf, it's just, the pictures are, unreal, considering it is a couple weeks before Thanksgiving and we're dealing with a hurricane, a Cat 1 hurricane. With that said, we also have to deal with a heavy rainfall. Big difference here versus, say, Orlando is that Ian had impacts on the beaches, but that big slug of rain missed Vero Beach to the north and then off to the northeast. So they didn't get that 13, 14 inches of rain that they had up in central Florida. So if you look at the year-to-date rainfall in this area here in Vero Beach, they're down about a foot of rain. So it's drier here, certainly, versus what they had with the rainfall in Orlando. So, Dr. Nab, just a wild night out here. And I mentioned earlier that I covered Ida, and then I covered Ada. But I've never covered a hurricane. Nobody's covered a hurricane, if you think about it, this late in November on the east coast of Florida.
Yeah, it is amazing how this season has been so second half loaded, right? No storms in August.
And not too far away, meteorologist Mike Seidel has been joining us live from Vero Beach, where Nicole is nearing landfall tonight. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Chris, the waves crashing onto the wall, the seawall, and some spray coming over into the front lawn here at the hotel. No concerns at all with water getting into the first floor rooms because the tide is beginning to go out a little bit. High tide was about an hour ago, hour and 15 minutes ago. But we won't have the push of water as Nicole comes towards the coast, makes landfall probably about 1 or 2 a.m. south of here, but probably just north of the Palm Beaches. But look at the surf out here. And as I said, it's been elevated since Sunday. This has been a 4-day affair. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, granted, the waves were this rough back on Sunday, but each day the waves got higher. And we have a sustained wind of 20 miles an hour Monday, Tuesday. And then today we started to see the winds ramp up as the gradient tightened up. Remember, one of the reasons we have this wind extending so far north is because we have a strong pressure gradient. A lot of isobars on the weather map, lines of constant pressure, high to the north, low to the south. In this case, not your basic low, but the latest hurricane on record after midnight, once it makes landfall, to make landfall on the east coast of Florida. So the rain is pelting us, and on the radar you can see that we have some very heavy rain coming in, these outer bands around the center of Nicole rotating in, rainfall rates of maybe an inch an hour. And remember, we have the flood watch up until 1 p.m. here in this part of Florida here on the Treasure Coast. So, Dr. Nab, just another long day of unrelenting battering of the beaches, and by far the #1 impact visually you would see if you went away last week and came back tomorrow or the next day is how much sand is lost, how much sand has been lost on these beaches here in Vero Beach. But unlike what we've seen up the coast, we don't know of any homes or properties that are in any threat of literally falling in to the Atlantic like we saw up the coast at Daytona Beach.
Yeah, but the 1-2 punch from Ian and now Nicole.
Right there in the middle of things is meteorologist Mike Seidel. He is live in Vero Beach, where it's going to be very close to where Nicole is expected to make landfall tonight. Mike?
Yes, indeed. Later on tonight after midnight, a landfalling November hurricane, the latest on record on the east coast of Florida, and the second latest on record. We had Kate back in 1985. I believe it was the 22nd or the 21st, 22nd over on the Panhandle. But you got to look at the surf. I mean, this is, you don't want to look at me. You want to look at this. Look at these waves out here. Holy cow. You know, it doesn't do it justice at night because we can't light up the Atlantic, unfortunately. But if you're watching this today, or anybody on the Weather Channel, Reynolds, Jen, Cantori, I mean, they're breaking halfway out there towards the Bahamas, or south, and they're just rolling in long periods. I think the period's about 15 seconds. That's the time between each crest. It's a long period setup. They're coming into this seawall, and summer before last, I saw pictures, and the beach went out about 75 yards. Here comes another wave up here. I don't know if we'll get any splash ever. The Corps of Engineers did replenish this beach, but as we see up and down the coast, storms come in and Mother Nature takes its course and you lose the sand. Now, there will be some natural replenishment of the sand over the next few weeks and few months. But with that said, we lost a big chunk, what was left of the dune from previous storms, and Ian, just down here yesterday into this morning, it was 4 feet tall and about this wide, and it just got eaten alive by these winds. They're running about 40 now, so right around minimal tropical storm force, and we're getting gusts occasionally to 50 miles an hour. Remember, this is not Ian. We're not going to get 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts, but gusts to 70, 75, not out of the question. That's going to knock out some power. Already we've had about 10 to 12,000 customers without power. So, Chris, another night of pounding on the beaches. This time we throw in the very heavy rainfall. By tomorrow morning at sunrise, that wind will be offshore and things will settle down here on the Treasure Coast.
All right, meteorologist Mike Seidel. Very rough surf there behind Mike. From Vero Beach is the Weather Channel's meteorologist Mike Seidel, where Nicole is expected to be very close at landfall. And Mike, the wave action behind you is dramatic, and I know you've been looking at the beach for the past couple of days. Can you kind of walk us through how things have changed?
Yes, the waves have been up since Sunday. They're really, really up today and tonight as we get the approach of Nicole. And the fetch, so the fetch has been all the way across a lot of the southwest Atlantic around Nicole, and you build up that swell and then that propagates in. So we really noticed the waves ramping up yesterday, and now we've got the winds gusting over 50, even 60 miles an hour, and the rainfall and sustained winds in tropical storm force. So what has happened is a northeast wind tends to be an eroding wind on the east coast, and that's what the wind has basically been since Sunday. Now it's more north right now, a little more parallel to the coast. But I want to take you back to yesterday and show you what's going on as far as the erosion and this time lapse as we go through yesterday, and you can see how the waves just come up and eat away at that dune, and then it's gone. So that's what's been going on consistently since Sunday, and especially at high tide as the waves come up and crash onto the seawall. Now, the fortunate thing is we're now seeing the tide starting to go out. The water's going to be pushed up by Nicole, and we've got low tide at 218. So putting all that into the mixing bowl, Chris, we're going to look better than we would, obviously, if high tide was coinciding with landfall of Nicole. So that's going to save us a little bit of water, and I don't have any issues. We don't have any issues in the property in this area. And in fact, in Vero Beach, there's nothing that I've heard of that's, dangling on the precipice to go into the Atlantic like we've seen up the coast in Daytona.
All right, meteorologist Mike Seidel reporting live there in Vero Beach. We'll be back to Mike in just a moment.
So those are the particulars on the new advisory. And Mike Seidel, you're in Vero Beach still. The winds will be getting stronger because we're still a few hours away from landfall. That'll be after midnight. And it may be that you get the strongest winds on the northern side of it if the center comes ashore just south of you.
Like we are right now, Dr. Knapp. This is the strongest squall we've had so far. You can see on the radar it's kind of the outer eye wall. It's not solid. It's nothing like Ian by any imagination. We were in the eye wall on Ian for about 6 hours, winds gusting over 125 miles an hour. We'll probably get a gust 70, 75. That'll knock out some power. We've had about 10 to 12,000 customers out earlier this evening for the entire state, and it's all on the East Coast. This is where the story is. Now, tomorrow it'll move over towards the West Coast, but in a weaker variety. Look at the surf out here. My gosh, I can't even turn around. The rain is so hard, it's stinging me. But the wave action just eating away at the beaches. The tide is now beginning to go out, but we're getting the push in advance of Nicole with landfall, 4, 5, 6 hours away. So that'll negate that, but also the tide will continue to go out. Low tide is 218 Eastern. I've been mentioning that number off for several days because that's the key here. Do we sync up the landfall and the push of water as it goes towards the coast and makes landfall with the low tide? And we're going to be in the ballpark, and that'll save us a couple of feet of water. All we're getting up here on the lawn in front of the hotel are some waves hitting and spraying over. No concern about any of the property here taking on any salt water except what's going to blow in through the windows or whatever. Let's go up the coast. Jim Cantori's had quite a story today with condos and buildings falling into the Atlantic. Okay, Jim, back down the coast here. Mike Seidel in Vero Beach, Florida, on the Treasure Coast. Landfall just around the corner. Nicole coming in November. The only other hurricane that's come in later in the continental United States was Kate in 1985, a few days before Thanksgiving. With that said, as it comes on shore, again, the water continues to pile up, but the tide is going out. The surf has been up since Sunday. We've had this northeast wind since Sunday. I was looking at the surf cams on Sunday as I was heading down here, and no matter where you look, from Boca to here to the Space Coast up towards St. Augustine and Jacksonville, everybody had hefty waves. Not like this, of course, but certainly the elevated surf and the wind persistently blowing it northeast to here 20 miles an hour or so until today when it ramped up. That has really decimated the beaches here. And as I said earlier, if you went out of town on vacation and came back and looked around, you'd see some palm fronds down tomorrow morning. And that would be about it inland for the most part. But you come out here and you're going, what happened to the beach? Now, it wasn't super wide to begin with, but whatever doom we had here is gone. That was wiped away, and now these waves just continue to take the sand out. It will naturally replenish. I grew up on the beaches of Maryland and Delaware, and you think, oh, what happened to the beach? But over time, some of that sand will come back. So, Dr. Nab, the cycle of nature, Corps of Engineers built these beaches back up, I think, a year or so ago, and that is seems like to me. Just a process where you're just spinning your wheels. They do that all the time up on the mid-Atlantic coast, and every 3 or 4 years, you're just battling what's going on in the atmosphere and what's going on out in the Atlantic.
Yeah, and it can be a very frustrating battle because there's been all kinds of dune restoration done in places like northeastern Florida, St. Augustine Beach and Jacksonville Beach.
We're back here at Vero Beach. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel here on the Treasure Coast. We've been here since Sunday, and the wind has not stopped blowing. It's blowing a lot harder right now, obviously, and we apologize for that. One thing I've learned tonight and for many, many years is hurricanes and alcohol don't mix, so we just can't help it. These people are going back and forth, and they've had a little bit too much of an adult beverage. Look at the surf out here tonight. Just incredible. We've got offshore Cape Canaveral, we've had up to 35 footers, 35 feet. It's hard to tell how high they are here. I mean, we got 8 or 10 footers. What they do is they hit the seawall, and then the water goes back, and they come together. And boy, we'll see if we get one here. This wave will come up here and hit the seawall. Some of it blows over, and then as the water goes back, the wave goes back to the east and hits this wave coming in, and wasn't that impressive, but just a lot of wave action out here. And the bottom line is we're losing more and more of this beach. The tide is going to be low at 2:18 a.m., about the time Nicole makes landfall, probably just south of here. So that's going to help us out in the overall water level with that surge warning of 3 to 5 feet. There goes a wave just over the seawall. With that said, this seawall here, we're not concerned about any water getting into these properties. Winds, we were in the break. I think we had another gust 60, 65 miles an hour. It's just roaring through here with some very heavy rainfall. And you can see on radar where the center is. It's moving now west-northwest, and about 30 minutes ago it was about 75 miles east-northeast of Palm Beach. So it obviously is going to go in north of Palm Beach, but I don't think it's going to be this far north. And this is not like Ian or a major hurricane where you have this solid eye wall and you're going to get wind gusts 125 miles an hour. That's not the case here. This is a minimal Category 1 hurricane, Dr. Nab, but enough wind to knock out power. And as you can see, enough wind to rattle my jacket tonight here at Vero Beach.
And you really get the sense of the power of the water in this case with that shot behind you, Mike. Thanks for conveying what's going on there at the coastline.
And right now we want to get back out live to the east coast of Florida. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is live in Vero Beach, where Nicole and the wind well ahead of the center of the storm has been pounding the beach there, Mike. When you look at this storm and what you've seen there on the ground and knowing what's going on up and down the east coast of Florida, what stands out the most to you about this storm?
certainly the width and breadth of the beach erosion and the surf. We've been dealing with this since Sunday, not at this magnitude, of course, but from South Florida through the Treasure Coast, Space Coast, up towards Jacksonville, the whole coast, and now into the Carolinas, Georgia and the Carolinas. We've had this onshore wind, courtesy of Nicole, developing subtropical, tropical, now a hurricane, and a high to the north. So the wham, the double whammy, and the pressure gradient. By the way, that squall that just went through here, weather station just up the coast 5 miles reported a wind gust of 75 miles an hour, so that's hurricane force. The airport inland, which makes a difference. I mean, you get the friction that lowers the wind speed, gusted to 54 miles an hour. So we've had enough wind, certainly, to knock out some power. We'll check the latest on the power outages. By the way, Florida Power and Light a couple days ago mentioned they had 13,000 crews ready to take care of any power that gets knocked out. And I'm sure many of those are barely just getting rested from that horrible situation with Ian in Southwest Florida. The surf is wound up. Now the tide is starting to go out. It has been for about 2 hours, but noticing that the whole beach is still pretty much underwater. Not a frequent rise in the water and then the splash over. So we are seeing some of the water going out, but Nicole is approaching, and then we have to deal with the storm surge. We've got a storm surge warning up now for 3 to 5 feet for most of the coast, actually. That's another thing about this storm. Typically, along and to the right, where it comes in, you have the highest storm surge, but it doesn't extend several hundred miles or a couple hundred miles up the coast. But that's the nature of this very broad circulation that tightened up enough, became tropical, and is now going to be the latest landfalling hurricane on record on the east coast of Florida. We're live all night, and we've got Jen Carfagner. She's getting geared up. She's going to be on all night from 1 to 5 a.m. Eastern up at Cocoa Beach as Nicole makes landfall in the overnight hours on a Thursday morning.
So Mike Seidel, who's in Vero Beach, I think, Mike, the greatest chances of the strongest winds, and they're going to get stronger than what you're experiencing now, are going to be from where you are up to Cape Canaveral over the next few hours.
Yes, indeed. These are sustained in the 40s, and the rain is really coming down. We're going to have Chris Erickson pan over towards the light, and you get an idea of how hard it's raining, blowing around. You know, it's not like snow. Snow's very sexy on camera, and, you know, a little bit of light snow looks like it's a blizzard, but with rain, it doesn't pick up and reflect the light like the ice crystal. So you can see how hard it is raining, and is blowing sideways, obviously, and the wind is about parallel to the beach. We had northeast winds since Sunday, and today they've moved around to the more the north, and with that, that's pushing the water down the coast and longshore drift. High tide was earlier, about 8 o'clock. Now we've got low tide coming up at 2 o'clock this morning as Nicole comes to the coast just south of here. So that's going to help us out a little bit because the water's been going out, and it has gone out some. I'm looking down here in the dark, and I can see the rocks. By the way, we had a dune that was about 4 feet high down there, what was left of the dune, 4 feet high and about 8 or 9 feet wide, and it was washed away overnight, and by this morning that was gone. All we have is the concrete barrier, the fence, and we have some rocks below us. The surf is just crazy. That is going to tame down tomorrow morning, and by midday tomorrow it won't look anything like this. The wind's going to turn offshore, and that southwest wind will help things out, keep the water away from at least most of the beach. Let's go up to Daytona Beach. They've had issues at Daytona Beach shores with property collapsing into the Atlantic, and we've got storm tracker Jim Cantori up there this evening. Okay, Jim, thanks. And the issue up the coast is they're going to have the onshore flow much longer than we are, because once that hurricane goes in and goes by us just to our south and west, the winds will start to go offshore. But up there, as the hurricane goes in and weakens to a tropical storm, they're still going to get that push. The farther north you go on the coast, the longer it lasts. Although the hurricane will weaken to a tropical storm, the winds will come down slowly. But the beaches up there, just like here, just getting decimated tonight, Dr. Dab. And these winds, as you mentioned, they have ramped up. It's a steady wind now, running probably 45 plus miles an hour in this outer eye wall, would you call it, Dr. Knob? Although it's not a solid one, it's kind of fragmented and ragged, but it definitely is a windier setup right now than it was an hour or so ago as far as a sustained wind.
Yeah, Mike, I think the area of coastline that's most likely to get a bona fide eye wall and that will get the strongest winds might end up being north of you, even though the center could come ashore south of you. Because the size of this hurricane, that's why there could be that disparity. You might be kind of in between. Let me explain.
Meteorologist Mike Seidel can tell you that firsthand knowledge of the scene there in Vero Beach, where, Mike, the winds and the waves and the surf has been relentless.
Yes, indeed. The surf's been up since Sunday. The winds have been steady northeast past several days, 20, 25, and today they started ramping up, 30, 35 now, running in the 40s, sustained, and we've had a gust here up the coast at 75. The airport now is gusted to 57, and they've had sustained winds at 39, which is the minimal. That's the low bar for tropical storm force winds. So we have verified a tropical storm. Now, with those winds, we've had some power outages. They're all on the east coast of Florida. Just over 11,200 just checked a minute ago. And here in Indian River County, 890. So the numbers are low. We hope it stays that way. We're not in the kind of winds we had with Ian by any means, where you get gusts hour after hour, 125 plus. This is no way, shape, or form anything like that. But with that said, Florida Power and Light was ahead of the game a couple of days ago, announcing and putting out a press release. They had 13,000 power crews ready to go, and we've seen some of them around here, eating dinner in groups, just waiting to see if they have to get sent out to get the juice back on. But like I said, only 890 right now in Indian River County. The surf has been the big story and the big visual. In fact, I mentioned earlier, if you went on vacation and came back here and you looked around tomorrow morning, you'd see some palm fronds down, Chris, maybe some limbs, some tree limbs. But by far the biggest visual change is past 3 or 4 days is the beach and how much sand is gone, the dunes gone, and it's just been like basically stripped naked. And fortunately, the last high tide of concern is past us. The water is going out, still coming up to the seawall here, but the tide goes out, low tide 218 as Nicole comes in. So we're in pretty good shape right here. Again, this is elevated area, and none of the property around here, none of this real estate is being impacted by water getting into the buildings because it is built up just enough. That has not been the case as we've seen, Chris, up the coast.
That's exactly right. Meteorologist Mike Seidel will be checking back with you in just a few moments.
Our Mike Seidel, who's in Vero Beach, that is a spot where you could get the landfall maybe near you or maybe just to the south of you. But I think the strongest winds, because of this 50-mile wide eye, could end up being north of you in places like Sebastian or Melbourne.
Interestingly, I just measured the eye on my phone, Dr. Nav, and I got 50 miles too. So I'm glad I agree with one of the foremost experts in the tropics on the planet. So I got the mathematics right. But it's a huge eye. But again, it's not concentric. We don't have thunderstorms rotating around the whole thing. But with that said, we're now at a break from the rainfall. You can see where we are on the radar in relation to that big eye, big circle coming at the coast, moving east-northeast. And because it is, west-northwest, because it is east-northeast of the Palm Beaches, it'll go in north of there. Maybe Stewart, certainly up here towards the northern end of Hutchinson Island, or maybe down farther south on the island. With the winds already gusting to 75 miles an hour, power outages continue to rise. We've gone from 11 to over 15,000 customers. And the whole visual we've been showing you now, this is the 4th day, is the surf. And we can't do it justice because it is pitch black out here, but we throw enough light, as much light as we can, and there's still huge waves. We're talking 8, 10, 12 footers. Off the coast earlier, the buoy off Cape Canaveral had wave heights up over 30 feet. 30 feet. The tide is going out. That's a good thing as Nicole comes on shore. So we have gone through the last high tide of 4 days of high tides. That's 8 high tides where they've been running above average. The wave action has wiped away a lot of sand on the east coast of Florida.
Let's get the latest now from meteorologist Mike Seidel live in Vero Beach, where it has been relentless, Mike.
It has for 4 days, the onshore wind, the battering waves, and the Storm Prediction Center has put out a mesoscale discussion on the tornadoes, but they're saying the tornado risk is going to increase after midnight from here up the coast towards Jacksonville as the storms off the coast rotate in. They have more instability, but they're saying that because of the spatial set up with the storms that they probably will not issue a tornado watch. They say the odds of a tornado watch are 40%, but you always worry about spin-ups when you have a landfalling system in the right front quadrant. So as it comes in to the right and to the front, that's the area that has the highest risk because of the dynamics of twisters. We'll keep you updated every night. We're on all night tonight. Jen Carfagno, 1 to 5 a.m. Eastern from up the beach in Cocoa Beach. The surf unrelenting. The tide is going out. That's a good thing. We're very fortunate that we're not timing the landfall with the high tide. We've had our last high tide of concern. The ones tomorrow will feature an offshore wind, and we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy as the weather tames down and the temperatures, by the way, will be in the low 80s for the next 5 to 7 days. We still have a lot of rain to deal with. We've already had 1 inch to 2 inches of rain, depending on where you have been in relation to the bands coming in. Some of it has come down very hard, along with wind gusts to hurricane force on the beaches. The airport is gusted almost 60 miles an hour inland, and so that is where we stand on the winds, and that will knock out some power. Last time I checked, we had 15,000 customers in the whole Sunshine State without power. So the numbers are low at this point. Let's keep them low. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we can keep the power back on. We'll come back, get the latest from Dr. Rick Knabb next.
Sebastian Inlet just gusted to 66, and our Mike Seidel, who is in Vero Beach, Florida. Your winds are increasing, Mike, but still, this isn't the strongest you're going to see, I don't think. Look at that ocean behind you. Wow.
I know, it's just amazing. And it's November. You know, if you're going to see a surf like this in November, usually it's up the coast. I'm talking about the Northeast. You have a big nor'easter, and it just churns up the ocean. Like the storm, the perfect storm back in, what was it, 91, late October 91. But this is a bona fide hurricane category 1. It's going to make landfall in the next 3 to 4 hours, and that will make it the latest landfalling hurricane on record on the east coast of Florida and second latest on the record. So that puts it in perspective, and we kind of bookend the season. Remember, August we didn't have any storms. October was quiet. We had Ian in late September, and now we have Hurricane Nicole. And from a personal note, my first live coverage for this hurricane season was right here in this spot, Vero Beach, back on June 4th and 5th. That was potential tropical cyclone 1. We had some heavy rain and wind for about 3 hours, and then we were back out on the beach showing the surf. Nothing like that. So kind of bookend the season, early June, and now into the second week of November. The surf is up, and the beach erosion has been the big issue all the way since Sunday, and really lost a lot of sand starting Monday night into today, into Wednesday, and we're going to keep losing some sand even tomorrow morning as the winds go southwest. But the tides will not be nearly as high as they were because the wind will be going offshore. So we've dealt with our last high tide of concern. Low tides at 2:18 a.m. as Nicole makes landfall, maybe a little after that. So that's a fairly decent help from the water perspective, but you can sense how strong the sustained wind is out here right now. Over 40 miles an hour bouncing me around, but not incredibly gusty. When we get the squalls that come in with the very heavy rain, we had one about 5 or 6 minutes ago, then you feel the stronger gusts, like right there, maybe 50 plus. So we're going to be dealing with this for another 5 or 6 hours, Dr. Knabb, until the storm goes by, and then we get the offshore wind by sunrise. And tomorrow, maybe some tailing showers and thunderstorms, but by far, we're going to be in much better shape than up towards, say, Daytona and Jacksonville, because the storm is going to stay south and then southwest of them. So they're still going to have that onshore flow, although a bit weaker as Nicole weakens once it moves onshore.
Yeah, Mike, and the next few hours are going to get worse from where you are north to Cape Canaveral. That's the zone where I think we could get some of the strongest wind.
Back back here on the east coast of Florida. This is meteorologist Mike Seidel. It's Vero Beach, Florida, Indian River County. And let's go to the radar because this is really our best tool right now because Nicole is just a few hours away from landfall. It is moving west-northwest, and it looks like it's going to landfall around Fort Pierce. It's a large eye, about 50 miles wide. In fact, the edge of it, the eastern edge, or the western edge, is just about to the coast. But it's the northern and northeastern areas that is swinging in this way. The rain's starting again. We've had gusts to 75 miles an hour here at the coast, and at the airport inland, the peak gust is 50, much like we've seen up in Melbourne. This is not your typical system because it's very broad in nature. We have the high to the north, so we've got impacts all the way up into South Carolina with tropical storm watches. You don't often see watches extending that far from a tropical system. It really is all about the surf here at the beach and on the coast, because that combined with the higher than average tides, we've seen buildings, houses taken out. They've lost their front yards. They've literally collapsed into the Atlantic up north in Volusia County around Daytona Shores, the Daytona Beach area. Here we haven't lost any property. We've got a nice seawall here. Nothing has been threatened. We have had some water blow over the fence here. But the surge warning 3 to 5 feet is being counterbalanced by the fact that the tide is going out. The low tide now is about an hour and 45 minutes away, So that is helping us out. The winds are still rough, though. They're sustained in the 40s, and we've had, like I said, the gust is 75. The most recent gust up the coast has been 64, and at the airport, 57 miles an hour. Plus, you throw in the rain to the mix. The flood watches up and down the coast, most of the East Coast, until at least early tomorrow afternoon. So, Chris, it's been a long night so far, a long week on these beaches. The number one impact by far, the loss of sand, just the precious beach sand that we know we all like to go out and put our chair on and enjoy. Well, there's not much left. Now, with that said, when the tides get back to normal, there'll be some beach here, but the dune is gone, and all we've got is basically bare rocks and the concrete wall and the steel pilings underneath. Chris?
All right, meteorologist Mike Seidel, thank you for that.
Our Mike Seidel, who is in Vero Beach, is in that strongest northwestern part of the storm. That's where we're getting the strongest winds on land, from where you are up to Melbourne right now, Mike. But the big question is, where does that northern eye wall come ashore? Probably north of you.
I was just going to ask you that question. I've been looking at the radar, and I agree. I think it's going to be just north of me, up into Brevard County, Sebastian, Melbourne, that area. Jen Carfagno, by the way, is in Cocoa Beach, and she'll be back on the air and take us all night long. We're on all night tonight to keep you safe, keep you updated, and she'll start our coverage in about 25 minutes at 1 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, the wind still gusting over 50 miles an hour. We've had a gust to 75. The surf is not changed at all, except the tide has been going out now for about 4 hours and change. Although it's not a typical setup because we also still have a bit of an onshore component, plus the push as Nicole comes on shore. In fact, I just measured, we're about 55 miles from the center of Nicole. Of course, the eye is about 50 miles wide to our point here in Vero Beach. We're northwest of that area. It is moving west-northwest, but again, it's the northern and northeastern eye wall that's going to have the serious weather. We had I saw some lightning bolts too, and the Storm Prediction Center mentioned the tornado risk ramping up somewhat after midnight, although the chance of issuing a watch they put at 40%, so not a high risk. So with all that said, wind and rain continues, especially from here north, even after the storm goes on shore. Wherever it goes on shore, you take that point and go north, and you're going to have onshore flow continuing. And if you get up to Daytona Beach and Jacksonville, that is going to continue right on through a good point of Thursday morning.